What if the reason you keep wanting is not because you are ambitious, but because you feel incomplete? What if the next relationship, the next promotion, the next achievement is not actually what you are chasing, but you are using it to avoid looking at something deeper? Why does wanting never end? You get the person and then you want reassurance. You get success and then you want recognition. You get validation and then you want it again, over and over. Why does fulfillment fade so quickly? And why, even after spiritual growth, meditation, therapy, awareness, the emptiness never goes away? Today, we are not talking about manifestation. We are not talking about suppressing desire. We are not talking about becoming detached from life. We are going into the structure of desire itself. Because if you do not understand desire, you will spend your entire life chasing peace through objects that were never designed to give it to you. And that exhaustion you feel is not because life is hard. It is because you are looking for yourself in places where you can't be found. Welcome to the Detachment Circle, where we dive deeper into mindfulness, detachment, and spiritual wisdom to help you live with clarity and peace. I am Siddharth Das, your guide in this journey to self realization. Today's episode is on desire, wanting, and inner emptiness. We are going deep into why wanting never ends, why achievement still feels hollow, why we chase love, validation, success, and still feel incomplete. And what is the difference between a healthy desire and a compulsive craving? And how this inner emptiness is created? And what Vedanta says about fulfillment. This is not a motivational episode. This is not about think positive or just be grateful. This is about understanding why the mind keep reaching outward even when everything looks fine on the outside. If you have ever felt, I should be happy, but something still feels missing. Everything is fine, but still I'm not content. This episode is for you. Take a breath and let's begin. Let's start with something very simple. I want you to think about the last thing you really wanted. Like, really, really wanted. Maybe it was a person. Maybe it was success. Maybe it was clarity or money. Maybe it was recognition. Notice what happened when you actually got it. For a moment, there was relief. For a moment, there was excitement. For a moment, the mind became quiet. And then slowly, another desire appeared. Another want appeared. Now, this is the pattern most people do not examine. We assume the object, the things which we need, we desire, they gave us happiness. Now, in Vedanta, we say something very radical, that the object did not give you happiness, the temporary absence of craving did. Because when you intensely want something, the mind becomes restless. It keeps projecting, imagining, anticipating. When the object is obtained, when you have achieved it, that agitation stops for a moment. You get that temporary relief. And in that pause, your natural peace shines. You actually feel good in those moments. But you mistake that the peace is coming from the object. You think that whatever you have just achieved, it is giving you that happiness. No, the peace was always yours. The object only removed the disturbance for a little while. And because we understand this, we keep chasing the next object. Okay, I have gotten this, now what? I have gotten this person, now what I want. So, this desire is a never ending cycle. And this is why this wanting never ends. This desire is born from the sense of incompleteness because the ego feels limited, small, separate. So it looks outward for expansion, for completion. If I get this, I will feel whole, I'll be complete. If I become this, I will feel enough, I'll be satisfied. If I am chosen, I will feel seen. I will feel that I matter. But here is a problem. The ego is a structure built on lack. That identity was built around lack, on lack. And a structure built on lack cannot be satisfied permanently. Even when fulfilled, it remains insecure. And this is why you get the relationship and still fear losing it. You get the promotion, you get the success, and you still compare. You get the validation and you still want more of it. Because this wanting was never about the object, it was about the identity that believed that it was incomplete. In Vedanta, we call this avidya, ignorance of one's true nature. You forget your own true being. You mistake your ego as identity. And when you do not know yourself as whole, you experience yourself as lacking. And the lack creates desire. Desire creates pursuit, chasing. And pursuit creates temporary relief. And that relief creates dependency on the object. So that relief is the reason why you are hooked. And that cycle continues over and over and over again. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. This is clarity. The issue is not desire itself. The real issue is believing that fulfillment lives outside of you, that the object can make you feel content, complete. When you believe happiness is in the objects, life becomes a continuous chase. And that chase is exhausting. That chase never ends. Let me say this very clearly: desire for things itself is not wrong, but from where that desire is coming from. The unconscious desire is bondage. When desire becomes tied to identity, it stops being creative energy and it becomes psychological survival. If losing it would shake your entire sense of self, that is not inspiration, that is attachment. And attachment keeps the cycle alive. It keeps you hooked, it keeps you drained. And this is why wanting never ends. Because what you are truly longing for is not the object, it's not that person or that thing or that life. The wanting is the experience of being whole. That's what you're looking for. And that wholeness cannot be acquired, it can only be recognized. You cannot get it from outside, it is only revealed within. Sit with that. In the next segment, we will examine why achievement and success fail to satisfy this deeper longing. Let's talk about success. Not desire for a person, not craving for love. Let's first talk about achievement. You work hard, you build something, you reach a milestone, you accomplish what once felt impossible. And for a moment, you feel powerful. And then something subtle happens. The excitement fades, the silence returns, and the mind asks, what's next? Why? Why does something you worked for years to achieve feels insufficient after a while? Vedanta gives a very uncomfortable answer because no finite object can satisfy an infinite being, an infinite longing. Your true nature is not limited, but the ego believes it is. So it tries to expand through accumulation by gaining more. More money, more recognition, more security, more approval. But the expansion through accumulation is unstable because the one accumulating is still incomplete, still insecure. Let me say something sharp. If success could give fulfillment, successful people would permanently be peaceful. If marriages could end loneliness, married people would never feel empty. If validation could heal insecurity, compliments would cure self doubt. But they don't. Because what you are seeking is not stimulation, it is stillness. Achievement excites the ego, but excitement is not fulfillment. Excitement is movement, fulfillment is rest. And the mind confuses the two. We are trained to chase intensity, but intensity is not depth. This is why so many people reach their goals and feel strangely hollow. It's not because they are ungrateful, it's because they expected the goal to fix their inner sense of lack. And no external achievement can repair an internal misidentification. The ego says, when I become someone, I will be enough. But the truth is, you already are enough. But that statement only makes sense when deeply understood, when it is lived. Until then, achievement becomes a coping mechanism. Not because ambition is wrong, but because ambition becomes identity. And when identity depends on success, peace becomes conditional. And conditional peace is a fragile peace. The deeper longing you feel is not for applause, it is for freedom from becoming. You are tired not because you work hard, you are tired because you believe your worth is always one step ahead of you. That is exhausting. I want you to sit with these questions for a while. After your last big achievement, how long did the satisfaction truly last? When you imagine losing your status, role, identity, does fear arise? If yes, is it the loss of the thing or the loss of who you believe you are through it? Don't answer intellectually, just observe honestly. In the next segment, we will go deeper. We will look at how inner emptiness is actually created and why it feels so real. Let's address the word that most people are afraid of: emptiness. People say, I feel empty. There is a void inside. No matter what I achieve, something is always missing. And the mind immediately tries to fix it. Find someone, find purpose, find distraction, find stimulation. But what if the emptiness is misunderstood? Vedanta makes a very important distinction. There is existential emptiness and then there is psychological emptiness. Existential emptiness is not negative, it is openness, spaciousness, freedom from identity. But psychological emptiness is different. It is created, it is not natural, it is constructed. How? The moment you begin to believe, I am this body, I am this personality, I am this story, I am this history, I am this identity, this attachment style, you reduce yourself. You fit yourself in a small box. And when you reduce yourself, you feel small. And when you feel small, you feel lacking. And when you feel lacking, you begin to desire. This is how inner emptiness is manufactured. Not because something is missing, because you misidentify yourself. Vedanta calls this avidya. Remember? Ignorance of one's true nature. You are not empty because life failed you. You feel empty because you built your identity around temporary things. And temporary things cannot provide a stable meaning. And childhood conditioning plays a role too. When love becomes conditional, you internalize a message: I am enough only when I perform, only when I please, only when I achieve, only when I am chosen. This creates a deep insecurity. And this is what I like to call a karmic loop. And that insecurity becomes the background hum. You may not consciously think it, but it operates. It drives ambition, it drives romantic pursuit, it drives comparison. It is running your life secretly. And even spirituality. Yes, even spirituality can become an attempt to fill emptiness. Meditation to escape, self improvement to feel superior, awakening to feel special. I see this all the time. People want to fit in a label. But here is the quiet truth: the emptiness you feel is not absence of something, it is absence of self recognition. When you do not recognize your own completeness, you will look outward. And outward will always disappoint eventually. Because no object, no person, no achievement can replace self understanding. And here is something subtle: emptiness feels terrifying because you believe it means nothingness. But in deep awareness, what you call emptiness is actually vastness. The problem is not the emptiness, the problem is your interpretation of it. You call it void. Vedanta calls it fullness without form. But until that is understood, you try to fill it with noise, with people, with goals, and the cycle continues. I want you to sit with this for a few moments. When you feel empty, what do you immediately reach for? A person, your phone, work, food, validation. Before reaching, pause and ask yourself, what story am I believing about myself right now? Just notice. No fixing, just witness. In the next segment, we differentiate something very important: healthy desire versus compulsive craving. Stay with me. Let me clarify very cleanly: desire is not the enemy. If desire was wrong, you would not move, you would not create, love, build, or even evolve. Desire, in its purest form, is energy, it is movement toward expression. The problem begins when desire becomes tied to an identity. There is a difference between I would like this and I need this to feel whole. That difference changes everything. Healthy desire feels light. You can pursue it fully. You can work hard for it. You can care deeply. But If it doesn't happen, your sense of self remains intact. Compulsive craving feels heavy. It feels urgent. It feels emotional. It feels like something is at stake. You think about it constantly. You overanalyze it. You attach your worth to it. If it succeeds, you feel good about yourself. You feel inflated. If it fails, you feel diminished. That is not desire, that is psychological survival. Healthy desire comes from inspiration. Compulsive craving comes from insecurity. Healthy desire says, this would be beautiful. Craving says, this must happen. Healthy desire expands you. Craving contracts you. Notice the body when you want something. Is there openness or is there tension? Is there curiosity or is there anxiety? That tension is the signal. I remember Osho once said something very practical. He says, desire is natural, attachment to desire is suffering. You can desire success, but when success becomes proof of your value, it turns into bondage. You can desire love, but when love becomes your emotional oxygen, it turns into dependency. You can desire recognition, but when recognition becomes identity, you become fragile. And Vedanta does not ask you to kill desire, it asks you to examine the one who desires. When the sense of self is stable, desire becomes play. When the sense of self is unstable, desire becomes addiction. Here is something subtle. Craving always promises relief. It will say, once this happens, you will finally relax. But relaxation does not come from fulfillment. It comes from releasing the grip. That is detachment in action. That is vairagya in action. Not suppression, not avoidance, just loosening the psychological insistence, that psychological grip. You can pursue your goals. You can love deeply. You can want success. But if losing it would shatter you, look deeper. Because the object is not the issue, the attachment to identity is. With me, I want you to sit with something. I want you to ask yourself very honestly, is there something in my life right now that feels like it must happen? If it did not happen, what part of me would feel threatened? Would I feel disappointed? Or would I feel diminished? Will I cease to exist? Sit with that. And in the next segment, we will bring this into love and validation. Why being chosen feels so powerful and why it never fully satisfies. Let's talk about something most people don't admit. Many desires are not about love, they are about being chosen. You do not just want the person, you already have them. You want to feel selected. You just don't want attention. You want confirmation. You don't just want love. You want a proof that you matter. And that's honest. When someone chooses you, it temporarily quiets a very old question. Am I enough? For a moment, that question disappears, and that relief feels like love. But look closely. Is it love, or is it the relief of insecurity? When the validation comes, the ego relaxes. It feels expanded. But that expansion depends on someone else's action. So the moment attention decreases, the insecurity returns. This is why the cycle never ends. You feel wanted, you feel high. Then the mind asks, do they still want me? Am I still important? Am I still special? You seek reassurance again and again and again and again. This is not because you are weak, it is because identity is externalized. When your sense of self is built on being desired, you become emotionally unstable. That insatiability creates craving. Let me explain. Let's go deeper. Why does being chosen feels so powerful? Because when you are chosen, you feel seen. And when you feel seen, you feel real. And here's the truth, you are not seeking love, you are seeking confirmation of your existence. The ego says, if someone sees me, I exist. Vedanta says, you are existence itself. But that truth is not experienced intellectually. Until it is recognized, you will keep looking for mirrors, romantic mirrors, social mirrors, professional mirrors. You will measure your worth by how reflected you feel. And that is exhausting because reflection is unstable. People change, attention fluctuates, attraction shifts. If your identity depends on reflection, peace becomes fragile. Understand this carefully. There is nothing wrong with wanting love. There is nothing wrong with enjoying validation. The issue begins when you cannot stand without it. When silence from someone creates anxiety. When distance creates panic. When not being chosen creates self doubt. That is where desire turns into dependency. And dependency creates fear. And fear kills love. And this is why people stay in relationships that no longer nourishes them. Not because of love, but because leaving would mean losing that mirror. And losing that mirror feels like losing yourself, losing the identity. But here is the turning point. When you begin to recognize yourself independent of being chosen. Love becomes lighter. You no longer chase attention. You invite connection. You no longer beg for reassurance. You communicate clearly. You no longer tolerate emotional inconsistency just to avoid feeling alone. That is maturity. That is the beginning of freedom. And that is where desire transforms from craving to preference. You can want love, but you don't collapse without it. That shift is everything. I want you to reflect on something. Ask yourself, when I want someone, do I want them? Or do I want the feeling of being wanted? If the attention disappears tomorrow, would I still feel stable in myself? Notice the answer without judgment. Let's try to dive into the spiritual core. What Vedanta actually says about fulfillment. Let's take this slow. Vedanta does not promise you more. It does not promise better relationships, more success, more attraction, more manifestation. It does something more radical. It questions the one who is seeking. In Vedanta, fulfillment is not an achievement, it is your nature. The self, Atman, is described as Sat Chit Anand, existence, consciousness, bliss. Not bliss as excitement, not pleasure as stimulation, bliss as completeness, bliss as nothing missing. When you say, I feel incomplete, Vedanta asks you, incomplete compared to what? Who is measuring? The ego measures, the ego compares. The ego says, I am less than, I am not enough, I must become. And this constant becoming creates exhaustion. Vedant points to something still. You do not become fulfilled. You recognize that fulfillment was never absent. Let's recap what we discussed earlier. When a desire is fulfilled, there is a moment of quiet. And in that quiet, happiness appears. You assume the object caused happiness. But Vedanta says, no, the object did not create happiness. The object temporarily removed that urgency, that agitation. When that agitation stopped, your natural state was revealed. Happiness is not produced, it is uncovered. You are not chasing objects, you are chasing relief from mental disturbance. And when disturbance stops, you feel whole. So the question becomes, what if fulfillment is not in the next thing, but in understanding the mechanism of craving itself? The moment you see that objects do not create happiness, when you see desire creates agitation, fulfillment is the absence of agitation. Your relationship with wanting changes. You do not suppress desire, you understand it. And understanding loosens it. This does not mean you stop living, you still create, you still love, you still pursue goals, but you no longer expect them to fix your sense of self. That expectation dissolves. And when that expectation dissolves, life becomes lighter. You stop chasing to feel whole. You start participating from wholeness. There is a difference. When you chase from lack, everything feels urgent. When you move from wholeness, everything feels intentional. This is the deepest shift. Not from desire to non desire, but from insecurity to awareness, from craving to clarity, from emptiness to recognition. And this recognition is not dramatic, it is quiet, it is stable, it is simple. It is the understanding that what you were seeking in objects was never absent in you. It's time to reflect. I want you to sit quietly with this. When was the last time you felt deeply peaceful? Was it because something was added or because something stopped? If craving stopped for a moment, who you were in that moment, that is close to your nature. That is closer to your nature than any achievement. All right, it is time to take some of your questions. So, the first question we have is, why do I feel like I need a partner to be seen, heard, and understood? What a beautiful question. The answer is because somewhere you stopped seeing yourself. When you are not comfortable witnessing your own thoughts, your emotions, and insecurities, you unconsciously look for someone else to validate your existence. You are not craving a partner, you are craving reflection. And reflection feels like proof that you matter. But you know the truth. If you depend on another human to confirm your existence, you will always feel unstable. Very practical, not heavy spiritual. The need to be seen becomes heavy when you don't see yourself clearly. When self recognition deepens, love becomes sharing. not survival. Let's move on to our next question. Why is there a fear of abandonment and emptiness? Because you believe someone else is holding your sense of self together. Abandonment fear is rarely about other people leaving you, it is about losing the identity you built around them. If they go, who are you? That fear reveals dependency, that you do not feel whole without that person. When your identity becomes self rooted within you, abandonment still hurts, but it does not destroy you. Pain is natural, collapse is attachment. Let's take our next question. How to accept that some desires are not meant for us? Beautiful question. The real question is not whether something is meant for you. I know it is quite trendy in the spiritual community, but the deeper question is why this desire feels essential to your worth. Some desires fade when understanding increases, not because destiny blocked them, but because clarity revealed that they were compensations. If a desire feels life defining, look carefully. Is it aligned to your growth? Or is it trying to fix insecurity? Acceptance is easier when identity is not tied to outcome. Moving on to our next question. Why do I keep wanting to be chosen? Very honest. Because being chosen temporarily silences self doubt. When someone chooses you, the ego feels validated. It feels visible. It feels important. But the validation is unstable. It must be renewed constantly. If your worth depends on selection, peace will also depend on attention. And attention fluctuates. Life happens. The work is not to stop wanting love. The work is to stop equating love with proof of value. Moving on to our next question. Is desire wrong spiritually? No. Like I said, desire is energy. Without desire, nothing would move. But unconscious desire creates bondage. Spiritual maturity does not kill desire, it purifies it. When desire is free from insecurity, it becomes creativity. When desire is tied to identity, it becomes suffering. The difference is awareness. And I tried to answer other questions throughout the episode. And if you notice something, none of these questions are about objects, they are about identity. Desire becomes painful when it is asked to solve who you are, and no object can do that. In the end, all I want to say is desire is not your enemy, wanting is not your flaw, inner emptiness is not a defect, but misunderstanding them is. You are not exhausted because life asks you too much. You are exhausted because you believe peace is somewhere ahead of you, outside of you, in the next person, in the next achievement, in the next milestone, in the next validation. So you keep running, not toward joy, but toward relief. And relief is temporary. The moment you see clearly that no object has ever produced happiness, that it only removed agitation briefly, something changes. The chase slows down, not because you lose ambition, but because you stop chasing identity. You can still desire, you can still love, you can still care, you can still build, but you no longer expect those things to repair your sense of self. And that is freedom. You do not suppress wanting, you understand it. You don't abandon the world, you participate in it without psychological dependence. When the need to be completed dissolves, love becomes lighter. Success becomes creative expression. Relationships becomes sharing, not survival. And emptiness becomes spaciousness. The shift is subtle, but it changes everything. If this episode stirred something in you, do not rush to fix anything. Just observe your next desire. Notice how it arises. Notice the story it tells. Notice what identity it promises to protect. That observation is already awakening. You don't need more. You need clarity. Thank you for being here. Do share this episode with someone who needs to hear this. This is Detachment Circle. My name is Siddharth Das. Until next time, stay aware, stay free, and stay true to yourself. Goodbye.